Yesterday, Magnus Carlsen was the first to score a win in this World Championship match. The question was, could Anand hit back straight away, as he did against Gelfand in their last World Championship match? Okay, let's have a look. We join the position after 37 moves. Carlsen has just played his rook back here. Anand tried something out of the opening, a little bit different. Didn't really get any advantage. And by this stage, well, it's about even. You could say that Black perhaps has a symbolic advantage because these double pawns are isolated, potentially a bit weak. But on the other hand, Carlsen has his own weaknesses. These pawns are a little bit vulnerable as well. And my feeling was during the game that if Anand just sat there, I don't see how Carlsen can make any more progress in this position. But incredibly, Anand played Queen G3, giving up this central pawn. Now, maybe he thought that he was going to liquidate pawns straight away. For example, in this kind of position here, maybe he was imagining that pawns are going to be liquidated. For example, they could reach a situation where they get all the pawns off on the queen side. So they have 3v2, all the pawns on one side of the board, and this is a standard theoretical draw. Maybe Anand was hoping to cut into that. But instead, Carlsen managed to keep his extra pawn and keep pawns on the queen side. So you can see there are pawns on both sides of the board, and that maintains more winning chances for Carlsen. Having said that, his rook is very passively placed, defending the pawn on b5. This rook, Anand's rook, is very active in the centre of the board, tying Black's rook down to the defence of the pawn. That's a nice move from Anand, preventing Black's king from entering the position here. So Carlsen played f6, but you can see, those pawns are pretty vulnerable, and well, still Anand looked good here. With his active rook, should be able to hold the position. And now I thought, well, if Anand just sat there, I really don't see exactly how Carlsen is going to make progress, because the king can't move away from the protection of this pawn. If we go back, well, maybe Carlsen could shift his rook over and activate his rook, but I still don't see how Black can make progress in that position. But instead of that, Anand gave up a second pawn. Well, Carlsen took it, of course. Now, I understand why Anand did that, because he can now put some pressure on these split pawns on the queen, on the king's side. But I just found that an extraordinary decision from Anand. It's almost an impatient decision. But Carlsen can still make a little bit of progress. Now here, well, okay, he's sacrificed his second pawn, and I understand why he's done it, because his king is now attacking this pawn. Carlsen really can't move that king away, because we'll take this pawn on h5. So what's Carlsen to do? His rook is rather tied to the defence of the pawn. But here Carlsen gave up that pawn at the side of the board. So he's managed to activate his rook, given up one of his extra pawns. It's incredible how Carlsen somehow manages to find new ideas, new ways to put pressure on his opponent. Really impressive. I mean, by this stage, they've been playing for over 4 hours, and it's extraordinary how Carlsen still has the energy to keep fighting. I mean, physically, he's very, very fit indeed. He's trains very, very thoroughly. He's in very good physical condition, and maybe, this is a big advantage for the 22-year-old against the 43-year-old world champion. Okay, let's see how the game went. So, by this stage, Anand's still defending well. Carlsen's coming forward, but White's rook still very active and able to hassle the king and hassle Black's pawns here as well. and this one too, as we're about to see. Carlsen moved his king back, and rook f8. So you can see, because these pawns are split, that means the rook can still attack them, and that makes it difficult for Carlsen to make progress. So the rook just coming back, hitting this pawn, making sure this rook can't move away very easily. And good move from Anand, just maintaining the pressure. King came back. And here is perhaps a critical moment in the game. After the game, both players were agreed that perhaps Anand should have just played the rook back to hit the pawn here. And if Carlsen plays in the game, advancing his king forward, well, this is simply impossible. It's just very good for white, actually. You can take this pawn. Otherwise, Anand is just going to take this pawn here, so probably Carlsen would have to come back. And here Anand could simply advance the king. I think he could also wait with his rook. I really don't see how Carlsen is going to make progress in this position. But instead of playing with the rook here, Anand checked again, and I think he'd missed Carlsen's very clever idea. After this, okay, Anand obviously thought he was winning this pawn, everything was fine, but Carlsen came forward, advanced this pawn. Now he wants to give up this pawn to create a dangerous, far advanced pass pawn. Let's have a look what happened. Well, Anand played rook here. Now, I don't like that move. It seems to lose a lot of time. But looking at Anand at this point, he seemed just totally depressed. It's almost though he'd given up the game. I think he had to play b4. Now, afterwards, both players said, well, this should be winning for black. First of all, you give up a pawn, move the rook back, and advance this pawn. So this is the idea. You're advancing this pawn towards the queening square. But, I mean, I haven't had a chance to look at this position in enormous detail. But it seems to me this is still very tricky indeed. The rook will check, will come behind this pawn, and then white tries to get counterplay with these two pawns. Maybe it's a win for black, but absolutely not obvious. That must have been a better defence for Anand. Instead he played here. This is a mistake. So once again, this pawn sacrifice enables Carlsen to create this pawn which is going to advance down the board towards the queening square. I like this move of the rook back along the g-file. Excellent idea. So that means the king here is cut off. It can't cross the line of the rook, and that means that the pawn is now very, very dangerous indeed. We saw this idea in the rook and pawn ending actually from the last game, where Carlsen also cut off Anand's king from stopping a pawn going through. So the game, c4, well, this is all in vain. The pawns actually get in the way of checking the king, but it's too late because the pawn is able to advance. Oh, incidentally, Carlsen could actually get a new queen here straight away. I think this is probably also winning, but it's still a bit tricky with queen against rook. The game continuation is actually much clearer. This is good. And now Anand is going to have to give up his rook for that pawn. And here Anand actually resigned. So let's just go a few moves further on and see how the game might have finished if Anand had wanted to continue. Well, you have to try and stop that pawn. So the rook is now behind the pawn. I mean, you can check the king, but the king will just run away and eat the pawns. But okay, let's see what happens if white tries to get counterplay with these pawns. Well, first of all, you get a queen. The rook has to give itself up, and then the rook will go behind these pawns and can actually take these pawns very easily, and that is the end of the game with an extra rook. Easy win for black. So there you go. Carlsen now goes 2 up. Now, in a 12-game match, this could be a decisive advantage for the Norwegian. I thought it was a really impressive game. It lasted 5.5 hours, and it's clear from the way these games are going that Carlsen's greater energy, his greater physical fitness is coming to tell, is really paying off in the final hour of play, and it looks like Anand simply can't maintain his concentration. So there we go. Tomorrow is a free day. They play the 7th game on Monday, but it's looking bad for Anand.